The first time Alina's world shifted, she didn't even notice it. The kitchen of Blackthorn Manor smelled of stale grease and burnt bread, a far cry from the pristine halls of wealth she had imagined. She adjusted her worn apron, its fabric thin enough to show years of patching and mending, and tried to ignore the cruel laughter of Mrs. Dalloway, the head housekeeper who seemed to take a particular delight in humiliating her. "Careful, girl. Don't spill another drop of that tea. You'll ruin the silver again," Mrs. Dalloway snapped, her voice slicing through the quiet morning. Alina bowed her head, cheeks burning, her hands trembling slightly as she carried the tray. She had grown used to being invisible to the world, overlooked and underestimated. Yet, in that invisibility she had learned something few others ever would: the power of patience and quiet resilience. When she moved through the manor, sweeping dust from the carved banisters or polishing the ancient chandeliers, she did so with reverence. Every object had a history, a story, a soul. And somewhere deep inside her, Alina understood that her own story had only just begun. It was during one of these early mornings, while arranging the vast library's shelves, that he appeared. Viktor Blackthorn, the vampire king of the East Coast, whose very name inspired fear among humans and immortals alike, moved through the shadows with a grace that made the candles flicker in awe. He was enormous, pale as moonlight, with eyes that shimmered gold, yet there was an edge of ice in them that could cut through steel. Alina froze, her heart hammering, not from fear, but because something about the way he watched her stirred a strange, unrecognizable warmth inside her. Viktor's gaze lingered on her hands, small and calloused from years of work. Most humans in his presence fumbled, cowered, or pretended to be someone they weren't. But Alina, she worked quietly, diligently, and without complaint. He noticed the smallest details: the way her hair was tied back neatly despite her poverty, the faint scars on her knuckles from years of survival, and the copper ring she wore, a twisted piece of wire holding a jagged shard of sea glass. A childish keepsake, yet she treated it as a treasure. It reminded him, in a flicker of memory, of a promise he once made to a young human girl long ago, a promise lost in the mists of time. The manor itself was alive with whispers that morning. Servants scurried, fearing Viktor's temper, the very air thick with the tension of unspoken rules. Yet Alina moved as if untouched by the storm, her quiet strength defying the chaos around her. When a stack of fine china teetered on the edge of a table, ready to shatter, Alina lunged instinctively, saving it. The sound of porcelain hitting the ground would have echoed like thunder in the quiet halls, but her hands were steady. Viktor's eyes narrowed, not in annoyance but in curiosity. Few humans ever reacted with such calm under pressure. As the days passed, Viktor began to watch her more closely. She never sought attention, never flattered him, never feared him openly. She spoke only when necessary, yet every word carried honesty and thoughtfulness. In the evenings, when she cleaned the grand halls or prepared the rare delicacies he required, she whispered ancient words to herself, prayers and blessings in a language almost forgotten. Viktor recognized the syllables immediately, a tongue only spoken by those with hidden knowledge, often in service to mystical arts or secretive orders. It wasn't long before Alina's small acts of bravery began to ripple through the manor. She treated the other servants with fairness and dignity, despite their differences, even helping a frail, trembling maid who had been humiliated by the cruel cooks. She shared what little food she could spare with the hungry cats that roamed the estate, and when a child of a nearby village fell ill, she tended to him with herbs and remedies she had secretly learned. Viktor observed silently, intrigued by her courage and compassion, qualities rare among humans, and almost extinct among mortals in his kingdom. The first real conversation between them came one night when the moon cast silver shadows across the stone floors. Viktor had descended into the kitchens, expecting only the cold aroma of salted meats and bread, but Alina was there, kneeling beside a spilled vial of red liquid. She looked up at him, fear flashing in her amber eyes, but not enough to mask the quiet determination beneath. I can clean it, my lord. Please forgive the mess." Her voice trembled, yet it carried a strength he had not anticipated. Viktor stepped closer and for the first time the air seemed to shiver around him. "Why do you care so much, human?" he asked, his voice low, a soft rumble of curiosity rather than command. Most would have cowered, but she met his gaze. "Because things are worth protecting even if I am nothing." Her words struck him in a way he could not explain. Here was a girl, fragile by every measure, yet unbroken in spirit. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched as she cleaned, carefully preserving each vial and dish. There was a quiet dignity to her movements, a respect for life and objects alike. And in that moment, Viktor Blackthorn, feared by all and known as merciless, realized something impossible. He wanted to protect her, to shield her from the cruelties of the world. And, perhaps, to ensure that no harm, mundane or supernatural, would ever touch her again. As the candlelight flickered across her face, highlighting the subtle sadness in her eyes, Viktor made a silent promise, one he hadn't spoken aloud in decades. He would marry her. Not as a whim, not as a conquest, but as a pledge born of respect, fascination, and the strange pull of destiny that seemed to tie their fates together. Little did Alina know that the ring she wore, a simple memento of her childhood, had already frozen his heart, a key to a story centuries in the making. And so began their tale, not with fireworks or proclamations, but with a quiet recognition. A poor, underestimated maid had caught the attention of the most powerful vampire in the land. And the world, dark as it was, would never be the same again. Alina couldn't sleep that night. The manor, which had always seemed cold and unwelcoming, now felt alive with a presence she couldn't name. Viktor's gaze haunted her thoughts, not in a frightening way, but in a way that left her heart racing and her mind strangely alert. She moved quietly through the dim halls, careful not to wake the few remaining staff who had survived Mrs. Dalloway's wrath. Every footstep echoed softly against the marble floors, blending with the distant sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below. She paused at the grand staircase, the shadows stretching long and serpentine across the walls. In her hand, the copper and sea glass ring pressed against her palm, warm and comforting despite its jagged edges. She had worn it for years, never removing it, and now she understood why it seemed important. Why Viktor's golden eyes had gone cold the moment he saw it. That ring, a simple promise from a long-lost childhood friend, had unknowingly tethered her to a fate far beyond her understanding. Meanwhile, Viktor prowled the manor silently, his senses attuned to every movement. He could hear the faint tremor of her breathing as she moved from room to room. She had not spoken, not even to acknowledge him, yet her presence stirred something deep within him, a sensation long forgotten. He followed her at a distance, unseen, like a shadow slipping through shadows. He noticed the careful way she straightened books in the library, the quiet precision with which she arranged herbs and teas in the kitchen. Every small act was deliberate, almost reverent. It was then that Alina noticed something unusual, a small compartment behind the wine rack in the kitchen. The wood was old, carved with intricate symbols she didn't recognize, faintly glowing under the moonlight that filtered through the tall windows. Curiosity and instinct pushed her fingers against the hidden latch, and the panel creaked open to reveal a collection of old journals, their leather worn and cracked. Alina's eyes widened. These weren't ordinary journals. They were filled with sketches of arcane symbols, cryptic medical notes, and writings in a language she knew she shouldn't understand. Yet, somehow, the words seemed to rise to her lips, whispering themselves in the ancient tongue her grandmother had taught her. Viktor appeared suddenly, his movements so silent she barely registered it at first. His golden eyes narrowed as he studied her, and for a moment she feared his wrath. But instead of anger there was curiosity, and something else, something softer that she couldn't name. "You can read that," he said, his voice low and measured, almost a rumble of disbelief. "No human should." Alina swallowed, feeling a flutter of defiance mixed with fear. I learned some things from my grandmother," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "She used to heal people, taught me herbs, remedies, and some old words she said could protect people." Her words trembled with honesty. Viktor studied her carefully, noticing the small flare of courage in her eyes. Humans rarely admitted to hidden knowledge without fear of punishment, yet she did so freely. He stepped closer, the shadows of his presence wrapping around her like velvet. "You are extraordinary," he murmured almost to himself. Few mortals would dare touch knowledge like that, let alone carry it as if it were their own. Alina felt a shiver run down her spine, not from fear but from the intensity of his gaze. For the first time she sensed that she mattered in a way she never had before. Days passed and the manor's atmosphere changed. Viktor, though still imposing and cold to the staff, began to watch Alina more closely. He noted the kindness in her eyes when she comforted the scared animals on the estate, the patience with which she taught the youngest servants their chores, and the bravery she showed when the windstorm toppled a heavy bookcase in the library. Each act, no matter how small, etched itself into his mind. One night, a sudden commotion in the village reached the manor. A fire had broken out in a small home near the cliffs, threatening a child who had been playing nearby. Alina didn't hesitate. She grabbed a small bag with herbs, remedies, and a few tools she had secretly carried with her since childhood, and ran into the night. Viktor followed silently, curious and concerned. He observed as she fought through the smoke and debris, lifting the frightened child into her arms and tending to the minor burns with practiced hands. Her courage, resourcefulness, and compassion radiated in a way that even a vampire as powerful as Viktor could not ignore. Back in the manor, as they returned, Viktor finally spoke in a voice that was softer than she had ever heard. You risk yourself for those who cannot repay you. Most humans would run or hide or scream for someone stronger. But you act. Alina looked at him, startled. She had expected scorn, not recognition. I do what I can, she whispered. I have to help. For the first time in centuries, Viktor felt a pull not of hunger but of genuine care, a desire to protect and cherish. He realized then that this fragile, underestimated human had awakened something in him. A longing, a softness, a spark of hope that he had buried under centuries of fear and power. And though neither of them spoke of it aloud, an invisible thread had tied their fates together. Alina's courage and kindness had begun to thaw the cold, immortal heart of the vampire king. The night ended with them standing side by side on the cliff overlooking the dark waves. Viktor's gaze was distant, thoughtful, yet he remained close enough that Alina could feel the warmth of his presence. She glanced down at her ring, its jagged sea glass glinting in the moonlight. Unknowingly, it had already bound them, an emblem of a promise, a destiny, and a story that neither could escape. And as the wind whispered through the cliffs, carrying the scent of salt and magic, Alina realized something terrifying and thrilling all at once. Her life had changed forever, and the power of one small human heart had already begun to alter the course of a vampire king's eternal existence. The following week, Blackthorn Manor felt heavier than usual. The storm that had swept the coast left the halls damp, the stone walls whispering with echoes of dripping water. Alina moved through the manor with her usual quiet diligence, yet something in the air prickled her senses, an uneasy tension she could not place. The servants whispered in corners and even the wind seemed to carry a warning. Viktor, ever vigilant, prowled the shadowed halls silently, his senses stretched to their limits. Alina, despite her growing confidence, felt the weight of the manor's secrets pressing in on her. She had uncovered the journals in the hidden compartment, read the ancient language with ease, and realized that Viktor's family had a past steeped in dangerous alliances, betrayals and long-forgotten wars between vampire clans. A shiver ran down her spine, yet she could not look away. Every word hinted at a darkness she didn't yet fully understand, but her curiosity outweighed her fear. It was during the afternoon, when the sun barely touched the horizon, that a visitor arrived. A human man, dressed in expensive clothing yet carrying the unmistakable aura of malice, entered the estate unannounced. Viktor had not sensed him approach, a rare oversight that immediately drew his attention. Alina, standing near the grand staircase, saw him first. The man's eyes lingered on her, cold and calculating, and instinctively she stepped back, gripping the railing as her pulse quickened. Viktor materialized beside her with terrifying speed. "Who is this?" His voice was a low growl, a rumble that vibrated through the floors and walls. The stranger bowed slightly, smirk playing on his lips. "A friend of sorts," he said smoothly. But Viktor's golden eyes didn't waver. He knew deceit when he saw it. Even humans who carried no magic could not hide lies from him. Alina's heart raced as Viktor stepped between her and the man. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but words failed her. It was then that the stranger moved with a sudden, unnatural agility, lunging toward Viktor with a dagger tipped in silver. Viktor's reflexes, honed over centuries, intercepted the attack, his movements fluid, deadly, and precise. The silver dagger clattered to the floor, and the man froze, realizing he was no match for the vampire king. "What do you want?" Viktor demanded, his eyes narrowing, the veins beneath them pulsing with an almost palpable darkness. The stranger's smirk faltered. "I've come for the girl," he said, and Alina's blood ran cold. "She possesses knowledge, power, that belongs to my family. Hand her over or suffer the consequences." Alina's mind raced. Knowledge? Power? Could he mean the herbs and ancient remedies she carried? Or the secrets she had read in the journals? She had always thought herself weak, human, fragile, but now she realized her life had become a battleground. Viktor's gaze softened slightly, a silent reassurance. "You will leave," he commanded, and with a flick of his hand, the stranger was thrown against the stone wall with a force that rattled the manor's windows. The man scrambled to escape, but Viktor's presence was absolute. "This is your only warning," Viktor said, voice low, almost a growl, yet tempered with restraint. "Do not return." And with that he vanished, moving like a shadow to ensure the man's retreat. Alina exhaled shakily, her hands trembling as Viktor turned toward her. For the first time she saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes, a hint that even the most powerful vampire could feel concern, even fear, when her life was threatened. She reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing his arm. The touch was electric, a quiet but undeniable connection that neither of them spoke aloud. That night, as the storm raged outside, Alina sat by the manor's massive hearth, reading the journals by candlelight. Viktor appeared silently, standing behind her as she worked. "You should rest," he said, voice softer than usual. "You carry burdens far heavier than you realize." Alina shook her head. "I can't ignore this. The journals, the visitor, it's all connected." Viktor sighed, a sound that was almost human in its weariness. "Yes," he admitted. "And there are others who would see you harmed for that knowledge. You have unusual skills for a human. Skills that could save lives, or destroy them." His gaze lingered on her, intense, and Alina felt both fear and fascination. She realized then that Viktor's interest in her was no longer just curiosity. He wanted to protect her, yes, but he was also drawn to her resilience, her intelligence, her courage. The storm subsided by morning, leaving the manor quiet and dripping with rain. But Alina could feel the tension lingering, the knowledge that danger was not far behind. She made a silent promise to herself: she would not run. She would not hide. Whatever secrets she carried, whatever power she might hold, she would face them head-on. Viktor watched her from the shadows, a rare expression of admiration crossing his face. "You are fearless, more than you realize," he murmured. "And perhaps that is why you are destined to be here with me." Alina felt a strange warmth at his words, a connection that went beyond fear or respect. It was a bond, fragile yet unbreakable, forged in the quiet moments of courage and shared danger. As they moved through the manor that morning, side by side yet still worlds apart, Alina knew one undeniable truth: her life had changed forever. She had entered a world of immortals, secrets, and power, yet in this dangerous, shadowed place she had found something she had never known before: a connection, a purpose, and the first hints of a love that could transcend centuries. And as the sun peeked through the storm clouds, casting silver light across the manor's stone floors, Alina's ring glinted, a jagged shard of sea glass holding not just a memory, but a destiny that neither she nor Viktor could ignore. The first light of dawn barely touched Blackthorn Manor when Alina awoke, her body tense and alert. The events of the previous days had left her restless, her mind swirling with questions she dared not speak aloud. Viktor had been watching her ever since the visitor had fled, his golden eyes glinting with something that unsettled and fascinated her at once: pride, curiosity, perhaps even admiration. Yet the unspoken truth lingered: the world outside the manor's stone walls was no longer safe for her. Alina moved silently through the halls, her bare feet pressing softly against the cold marble. Her thoughts returned to the journal she had discovered, the mysterious language that had sprung effortlessly to her lips, and the strange warmth that filled her chest whenever she touched the jagged sea glass ring on her finger. Could it be more than a keepsake? Could it, somehow, be tied to her destiny? She didn't yet understand, but instinct told her that it held the key to more than just memory. Viktor appeared without warning, a shadow beside her, as silent and fluid as the night itself. "You didn't sleep again," he observed, his voice low, a soft rumble that vibrated through the stone walls. "Your energy is dangerous if misdirected." Alina met his gaze, her own eyes steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. "I can't ignore it," she whispered. "There's something I need to understand, about the journals, about the ring, about me." Viktor studied her for a long moment, and she could feel the weight of centuries in his gaze. "Perhaps," he said finally, "the power inside you has been dormant for too long. And perhaps it is waking now." He did not explain further, but the intensity in his eyes left no doubt. He believed in her in a way no human had ever done. The next challenge came sooner than either of them expected. A message arrived, delivered by one of Viktor's spies from the hidden vampire networks. Another clan had taken interest in Alina, aware of her knowledge, her hidden abilities, and the strange aura that surrounded her. They demanded she be handed over, or they would take her by force. Viktor's expression darkened, his temper sharp as a blade. "They will pay," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. But even he knew that brute strength alone could not protect her from what was coming. That evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, Alina stood on the cliffs overlooking the stormy sea, practicing the words her grandmother had taught her in the ancient tongue. The air around her seemed to hum, charged with unseen energy, and for the first time she realized that the words were not just prayers, they were a form of power. The wind responded to her voice, the crashing waves below seemed to bend toward her will, and the jagged shard of sea glass in her ring glowed faintly, reflecting a light that was not of this world. Viktor arrived quietly, watching her from the shadows. There was awe in his expression, tempered with caution. "You're stronger than you know," he said, stepping forward. Alina startled but did not falter. I don't understand it fully," she admitted, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "It's like the words carry something inside them. Something alive." He reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder, not to command but to anchor her. "You must trust yourself," he murmured. "And you must trust me. Whatever this power is, it is tied to you. And it is tied to me as well." The contact sent a jolt through her, not frightening but electrifying. She realized then that their connection went far deeper than she had imagined, intertwining destiny, trust, and something neither of them fully understood. That night, danger struck again. Shadows moved in the forest below the cliffs, figures cloaked in darkness, their eyes glinting with intent. Alina's heart pounded, but she did not flee. Instead, she whispered the ancient words, her voice growing stronger with each syllable. The wind rose, swirling around the intruders, knocking them off balance. Viktor moved alongside her, his presence formidable and protective, ensuring none crossed the line into harm. Together, human and vampire, they formed a force neither had expected, a union of mortal courage and immortal power. After the attackers fled, Viktor's expression softened as he studied her. "You've changed," he said quietly. "Not just in power but in spirit. You've faced them, and you've grown." Alina met his gaze, her chest tight with a mix of pride and newfound confidence. "I didn't do it alone," she said, and he nodded, acknowledging her courage without diminishing his own. The night ended with them seated near the grand fireplace, the storm outside slowly abating. Viktor broke the silence, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "Alina, you are not just a human girl. You are someone destined for greatness. Someone I will protect, not out of obligation but because I care." Her breath caught in her throat at the confession, unspoken yet clear in the weight of his words. She realized then that she felt the same pull, a mixture of awe, respect, and something far deeper. For the first time, the jagged sea glass ring on her finger felt like more than a memory. It felt like a key, a symbol of connection, and a reminder that even in a world of shadows and immortality, a single human heart could illuminate the darkness. And as the embers of the fire flickered across their faces, both realized that their fates were no longer separate. They were entwined by danger, destiny, and the quiet power of trust and love. The dawn light barely pierced the stone walls of Blackthorn Manor, casting long eerie shadows across the halls. Alina woke with a start, her dreams haunted by visions of the intruders from the forest, their faces twisted, their intentions deadly. She felt the weight of the jagged sea glass ring on her finger and realized it was no longer just a keepsake. It pulsed softly as if warning her, as if guiding her. Something in her stirred, a sense that her hidden power had grown, yet she still did not fully understand its limits. Viktor found her in the grand library, standing silently among the ancient tomes, her hands trembling as she traced the arcane symbols in the journals she had discovered. His presence was immediate and commanding, yet softened by concern. "You did not sleep again," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The power inside you is dangerous if left unchecked, and the more you resist understanding it, the more it will control you." Alina looked up, meeting his golden eyes with a mixture of fear and determination. "I can't ignore it," she whispered. I need to understand it before it becomes something I cannot control. And, before they come back." Viktor's expression darkened and he stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "You are braver than you know," he murmured almost to himself. "But courage alone will not protect you from what is coming." That evening, the manor trembled with the approach of a new threat. A rogue vampire clan, aware of Alina's growing power, arrived at the edge of the estate, their intentions clear. They would take her or destroy everything Viktor had built. Alina's heart raced, but she did not hesitate. She had grown stronger, and her resolve had hardened. Whispering the ancient words she had practiced, she felt a warmth radiate from the ring, flowing through her body, amplifying her courage, her focus, her presence. Viktor appeared beside her, a living shadow of power and precision. "Stay close," he commanded, and together they faced the intruders. Alina's whispered words twisted the wind into a protective barrier, while Viktor's movements were fluid and deadly, striking down those who dared come closer. It was a dance of power, human and immortal, intertwined by fate and mutual respect. One of the attackers, bolder than the rest, lunged directly at Alina, dagger in hand. Viktor's reflexes were instantaneous, but it was Alina's courage and quick thinking that saved both of them. She stepped forward, the ring glowing, the ancient words spilling from her lips in a surge of light and energy that forced the intruder back, leaving him stunned and defenseless. Viktor's gaze softened as he realized the full extent of her abilities. She was no longer just a fragile human, she was a force in her own right. After the attackers fled, the manor was silent except for the sound of Alina's heavy breathing and the distant crashing of the waves. Viktor approached her slowly, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You did well," he said, his voice quieter than usual, carrying an unfamiliar warmth. "Far better than I could have imagined." Alina met his gaze, her heart hammering. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, the honesty in her voice resonating in the quiet room. For the first time, Viktor allowed himself to speak openly about his feelings, his centuries of isolation, and the strange, undeniable pull he felt toward her. "Alina, you have changed everything. Not just the manor, not just my world, but me. I cannot protect you fully if you do not trust yourself. And I cannot stop feeling drawn to you even as I should." Her breath caught. She had expected fear, respect, perhaps even admiration, but not this confession, subtle and raw, yet filled with centuries of longing. Their bond deepened that night, not through words, but through proximity, gestures and unspoken understanding. Viktor allowed her to rest beside the fire, close enough that she could feel his warmth, yet aware of the dangerous power coiled just beneath his skin. Alina, in turn, felt a sense of belonging she had never known, a connection that transcended the ordinary, a partnership forged in courage, trust, and destiny. Yet even as they shared this quiet moment, a new revelation awaited. In the journals, Alina discovered references to a prophecy, one that spoke of a human born with a hidden power, destined to bridge the worlds of mortals and vampires, to bring balance, and to awaken the heart of a king who had long forgotten love. She realized, with a mixture of awe and fear, that the prophecy was speaking of her. The ring, the courage, the knowledge, it was all part of a destiny far greater than she had imagined. Viktor sensed the shift in her demeanor, the realization dawning. "Do you understand now?" he asked softly, his hand brushing against hers. "This is why you are here. Not just by chance but by fate. You were meant to be with me, not as a servant, not as a curiosity, but as someone who completes me in ways centuries have not prepared me for." Alina's eyes welled with tears, a mixture of fear, pride, and the dawning recognition of her importance, not just to Viktor but to the balance of their intertwined worlds. As the night deepened, they stood together on the cliffs once more, the wind whipping around them. Alina felt her power thrumming in her veins, her ring glowing softly, and Viktor's presence solid and protective at her side. For the first time they were equal, not predator and prey, king and human, but two souls bound by destiny, courage and the slow, undeniable pull of love. The night was unnaturally still at Blackthorn Manor. Even the ocean waves seemed to hold their breath, as if the world itself waited for what was about to unfold. Alina stood on the highest balcony, her fingers tracing the jagged sea glass ring, its faint glow pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The prophecy in the journals had become undeniable. She was the key to a future neither human nor vampire had dared to imagine. And tonight that future would be tested. Viktor appeared beside her silently, the chill of the night clinging to his skin but unable to touch the warmth she felt radiating from him. "They've come," he said, his voice low, steady but with a dangerous undertone. "The clan that seeks to claim you, or destroy everything you've built. They won't leave until they've tested you, until they've tested me." Alina swallowed hard, feeling both fear and determination. She realized she was no longer the frightened human girl who had first stepped through the manor doors. She was something more. She was a force, a protector, and perhaps even a savior. From the darkness of the forest below, figures emerged, moving with predatory grace, their eyes glinting red in the moonlight. Viktor's presence became more imposing, his golden gaze piercing through the night, but it was Alina who drew their attention first. She raised her hands, whispering the ancient words that had been her shield, her weapon, and her bond with Viktor. The air around her shimmered, bending with energy, and the ring on her finger glowed like a beacon. The rogue clan advanced, their leader stepping forward, a vampire as old and powerful as Viktor himself. He sneered at Alina, dismissive, underestimating her human form. "Do you really think a mortal girl can stand against us?" he taunted, his voice dripping with arrogance. But Alina did not flinch. She felt the power within her surge, the connection to Viktor strengthening it, intertwining their wills, and she met his gaze with quiet defiance. "I am no ordinary mortal," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the cliffside. The battle erupted. Viktor moved like a shadow, his every strike precise, deadly, unstoppable. Alina's whispered words twisted the wind, hurled shards of light, and created barriers that sent intruders tumbling. They fought as one, predator and human united by trust, courage, and destiny. For every attack, Viktor defended her, and for every threat, Alina's power surged, protecting both of them in ways even Viktor hadn't anticipated. In the midst of the chaos, the enemy leader lunged at Alina, dagger aimed for her heart. Viktor intercepted, but the strike grazed his shoulder. Alina's instincts kicked in, she whispered the words of power with a ferocity she hadn't yet summoned, and a surge of energy erupted from her ring, knocking the leader back and sending the remaining attackers fleeing into the night. Viktor's eyes, usually unreadable, softened as he stepped toward her. "You are extraordinary," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His golden gaze held something unspoken, something that made Alina's heart ache and soar at once. "You are not just my protector, nor am I just yours. We are bound. By choice, by destiny, and by the heart." Alina felt tears prick her eyes, not of fear but of relief, pride, and an overwhelming sense of belonging. That night, with the manor safe and the rogue clan vanquished, Viktor led Alina to the highest tower, the ocean stretching endlessly before them. "Alina," he began, his voice unusually gentle, almost hesitant, "I have lived centuries, feared, respected, but alone. Never have I known what it is to trust someone completely, to care for them, and to be cared for in return. You've awakened something in me I thought long dead. And I can no longer deny it." Alina's breath caught. Her hands trembled as she held the glowing ring, a symbol of her courage, her history, and her destiny. Viktor knelt before her, a gesture that shocked her not because of humility, but because of the vulnerability it revealed. "I promised a boy I would always protect what is precious," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "And now I promise you, as the Vampire King, as the one who has walked centuries alone. I will stand by you, defend you, and, if you allow me, I will marry you." Alina felt her heart swell with emotion, tears streaming freely. I thought I was alone," she whispered, her voice shaking with joy and disbelief. "But you've shown me that courage, kindness, and love can change even the darkest of worlds." Viktor smiled softly, a rare, genuine expression that illuminated his cold, immortal features. He took her hand, the jagged sea-glass ring between them glowing brighter than ever, as if acknowledging the bond and the promise they had forged together. "Then stay with me," he said simply. "Not as a human servant, not as a curiosity, but as my equal, my queen, my heart." The wind swept across the cliffs, carrying with it the scent of salt, magic, and destiny fulfilled. Alina leaned into Viktor, feeling the warmth, the protection, and the connection of a love that transcended centuries. In that moment, human and vampire, mortal and immortal, stood united, not by power alone, but by trust, respect, and an unbreakable bond forged through courage, adversity, and destiny. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the manor in gold and silver, Alina realized that she had survived the trials, embraced her power, and found a love that even time itself could not deny. And Viktor, the Vampire King, knew for the first time in centuries that he had finally found the one human heart worth protecting, and the one soul he could never let go.